Hi, I'm Jennifer Hahn, and this is my Session 5 thread for Theology 510 concerning the whole concept of God image. So the first question is, how clinically important is the distinction between God concept and God image? So professed theology versus actual operational theology. And I really believe the distinction between God concept and God image is crucial, especially in the clinical setting. Moriarty and Hoffman explain that God image is the way we feel about and emotionally experience God. And this is what influences how we will act towards God within our faith and how we act out our faith. And the author just described the God image as being influenced by our background, especially our relationship with our parents and caregivers, and also concerning traumatic events. And then they go on to explain that mental health issues can arise when there are problems with a person's God image, of course, depending on the severity and the level of crisis. But truly, it's the God image that represents what we deeply and truly believe about God. It's so easy to just give all the right answers and put up a good front of spirituality and even saying all the right spiritual things, quoting those Bible verses, even being involved and thinking that you believe certain things about God. But the God image really represents what's in our heart and the deeper feelings of what we believe about God. I recently had a really unfortunate situation with a good friend of my husband's and mine, and he ended up cheating on his wife, and he's now leaving her, and we always thought he had such a solid faith, but he ended up telling us that he was able to say all the right things and even pray the right prayers, but he actually never felt God near him, never had an emotional experience with God. And so now consequently he is leaving that, and obviously that represents a really problematic God image, and of course that's no excuse on his part, but it just shows some of the problems that can occur between a God concept and a God image, which is why as counselors the God image is so clinically significant for us. And then furthermore, as counselors, familiarity with the spiritual counseling competencies I think is just important in that, and I actually really want to learn more about that because I feel like from the program I've gotten a piece of that, but I would like to really just gain more of that to help clients through that progress of healing with just empirically proven methods, and then through the therapeutic alliance, because really as counselors it will be our job to see through a person's outer God concept and professed theology to really discover their God image and their operational theology and the problems within that. So the second question is, when people's religious thinking and behavior get sick, as we know it sometimes does God image become one of the prime suspects? So since the God image is what we deeply feel and believe about God on an emotional, internal level, it is most likely that when there is a sickness with religious thinking and behavior that it's a result of a problematic God image. God image and operational theology encompass so much, and it really encompasses the mental and emotional level of faith, that it just really seems that very few issues concerning faith and relationship to God could be dealt with apart from the God image, since that's really what we deeply believe. And actually, I really do believe that these problems are not uncommon, and I would wager actually that the vast majority of believers encounter at least some problems with their God image at some point, and the severity, of course, is what matters, but some problems with one's God image and operational theology, I believe, are a part, or can be anyway, a part of growth as a believer, because as you learn more, you'll most likely encounter challenging questions about God, and as you encounter painful life circumstances that test your God concept, what you think about God, and what you say you think about God. So just even looking at David in the Psalms, Psalm 88:13-18 says, "But I cry to you for help, Lord. In the morning my prayer comes before you. Why, Lord, do you reject me and hide your face from me? From my youth I have suffered and been close to death. I have borne your terrors and am in despair. Your wrath has swept over me. Your terrors have destroyed me. All day long they surround me like a flood. They have completely engulfed me. You have taken me, friend and neighbor. Darkness is my closest friend. And just in that passage, I mean, there's a deep level of pain there and sorrow. And to me, it sounds like David really encountered some life circumstances that challenged his God image and just caused him that emotional and mental distress. But this doesn't necessarily mean that his whole faith was shaken. Obviously, he had a close relationship with God, but these times of emotional distress were also a part of his walk with God. And another thing that just gets tricky about our God image is something that Moriarty and Hoffman stated, that a person's God image is often very influenced by their relationship with their parents or childhood trauma. And if it's something that goes back a lot of years, there could be just layers of dysfunction to sift through. And it can be a process to figure out which thoughts and behaviors affect emotions and which emotions are exacerbating dysfunctional views and cognitions and just that interplay. So it can get complex. So for the third question, how does a professional counselor go about addressing a client's God image, and must the counselor suspend using the major psychological assumptions and interventions? So to answer the second question first, I don't believe that a counselor needs to suspend using the major psychological assumptions, because Moriarty and Hoffman have written a wonderful book that integrate both spiritual counseling with the major empirically proven psychotherapeutic approaches. So no, we don't need to abandon those. I think integration is going to be very important for that. But so how does one go about addressing that? I think the main theory that I really read about, Chris, for this session we discussed existential therapy, time-limited dynamic psychotherapy, and REBT. I was really drawn to the time-limited psychodynamic because it incorporates object relations, and incorporates pieces of that. It incorporates pieces of the psychoanalytic approach, humanistic emphasis, and there's of course an emphasis on the client-therapist relationship as really being like the healing element of that. And then one thing that the authors didn't quite emphasize that I think is important too is really digging through a client's past, not necessarily just in a crazy amount of depth, but digging into the past to find out where the roots of some of these problems with the client's God image arose from. Otherwise, I think you're addressing the surface level of the problem, but not addressing the root and really digging out the root. And I think with this time-limited approach, you can use some of the traits that Moriarty and Hoffman talked about, like the corrective emotional experience. I was really drawn to that. So basically the therapeutic relationship will hopefully help with the problematic God image, as one of the assumptions of the time-limited approach is that the client will project some of the same tendencies onto the relationship with the counselor. So Moriarty and Hoffman expanded on this, and they stated, from this perspective, the client's same interpersonal problem that was learned in the past, maintained in the present, and played out with the therapist is also going to be acted out in their relationship with God. That is, their interpersonal style not only colors their current relationships, but also colors the way that they emotionally experience God. And that's from page 80. And so that's just one of the main components of this approach, is that they'll play that out with the therapist, and then the therapist can address that and explore that, and then utilize corrective emotional experiences to, and then explain that corrective emotional experience to help the client really heal from that. And but getting back to that, I was really drawn to the corrective emotional experience piece because it is my belief, and I have this belief from my own experience, that healing in the counselor-client relationship cannot really occur unless the client has an experience that aligns the feelings with the cognitions. And this is why with REBT and correcting those irrational beliefs, and that's very important, it's an important piece, but unless there is an experience or the client has a change of heart and a change of feeling about that, and then has a cognitive experience to help solidify that and tie that together, that healing won't occur. Both the feeling and the cognition, the cognitive piece need to be there. So another approach that Moriarty and Hoffman discussed was the existential approach in helping a client with a problematic God image. And a quote I saw from page 106 that I really liked was a quote by Rollo May, which is, "The purpose of existential therapy is to set people free." And that really struck me because I believe that that's what God wants for us. God wants that freedom for us. It's his purpose for our life, is to set people free. And for people to live in that freedom of choice and freedom from anxiety and freedom to act responsibly. Those are all components of existential therapy, and to be able to make meaning from difficult life circumstances. And so those can be really important pieces as well for discovering more of a client's problematic God image. And of course, as I mentioned before, I think the spiritual competencies, culture and worldview, diagnosis and treatment, assessment, human and spiritual development, counselor self-awareness, and communication are really important. And I think that counselor self-awareness is very important too. That's something I've been working on a lot, and which sort of leads me to my next question, which is, have you ever felt some dissonance between what you believed about God and how you felt about God? And as mentioned above, I really believe that most people go through this, and I definitely have felt this. I've had some problems with my God image, and probably still do to a certain extent. I won't go into the full history, but for a long time I've had fears that God is angry and demanding, and that he's somehow unloving. And it was really interesting reading the story of Debbie that Moriarty and Hoffman discussed, because I could really relate to that story, how she felt that God was always angry and disapproving. And I ended up going into counseling, and my counselor said a lot of really helpful things that sort of corrected the irrational thinking piece. And then I was able to take those pieces into my quiet times with God and really take that before God. And I felt like just with my counselor's loving presence, and then taking some of those things before God, and just I had some wonderful experiences during those times. And that was really my corrective emotional experience that has helped with that. And though I'm still working through some of those things, that's why I sort of feel passionately about the importance of having a corrective emotional experience, or numerous corrective emotional experiences. But so those are my answers, and thanks for listening.